Okay. Daniel. Okay, Brad. Let's see. Mm. Okay, we're going to get started, Brad. People will join in
Right.
as they do. So everyone who is on, welcome to our monthly Fiduciary Education Forum event for the month of April 2024. I am Todd Wohl. I'm honored to make the presentation today. For those of you who know us, obviously, we sponsor and host the Fiduciary Education Forum monthly event and also the fiduciaryforum.com website. That is fiduciaryforum.com. And there you will find past presentation recorded videos, information, presentations, a whole litany of information for you to assist you in your business. I'm a partner with Braun International and Premier Estates International Real Estate. We work throughout the U.S. With trust companies, fiduciaries, in the trust and estate world, in the world of planned giving, donations, charitable foundations, and a whole host of other types of specialized clients that we work for. And I'm honored
Todd
today
Wohl.
to have
Todd Wohl.
the expert speaker, Brad Caswell, who is joining us with Charitable Solutions. And he has been so kind to put his time in to discuss giving and donating real estate and partnership interests to charity. So, Brad, I'll let you introduce yourself and your company.
Sure. Thank you very much, Todd. Thank you for hosting us. My name's Brad Caswell, and I work with a group called Charitable Solutions out of Jacksonville, Florida. And we are known under two names. One, the for-profit, which most people know us by, which is Charitable Solutions. And we host a charity of our own called the Decamai Foundation, which is how we manage some of our transactions. And together, we are in the business of helping charities with donations of complex non-cash assets. That could be real estate, could be business interests, which, as you know, could also be real estate. It could be collections of things. It could be any number of non-cash items that charities just throw up their hands and say, this is a new world and we don't understand it, or it's too risky, or we need to hold it too long. We'll go through all these reasons why charities might or might not want to hold assets. But we're in the business of assisting charities all over the country with donations of non-cash assets. Most of the time, we bring them into our charity, the Decamai Foundation. We manage them, we liquidate them, and then we send the proceeds off to the charity that originally referred the transaction to us. And that's the nature of our business. I'll show you some numbers a little bit later, but we've been growing. We've been in business about 21 years and doing pretty well. So let me start here with how a gift of real estate could be made. And really, there are three obvious processes. One is just an outright gift of real estate. I'm going to give you the lot and block and the deed and all of that, and you now, Mr. Charity, own the real estate. The second process, and then the charity can do what they want. They can add it to their physical plant. They can sell it and take the cash to advance their mission. But just an outright gift of real estate. Second, it could be used to fund an annuity or a trust, which would be life income for the donor. So somebody gives their property, it's worth, let's say, $250,000. That $250,000, once converted to cash, the property once converted to cash, can then be applied to a charitable gift annuity for the charity, or it can be put into a trust, so that there could be a life income stream from the proceeds of sale of the real estate. And then there's an odd esoteric process in the charitable world called a retained life estate. That's where the donor gives the right to own the property at the end of their life to a charity or to another institution. I'm not sure it has to be a charity. And in return, they get some benefits, but they can continue to live in the property. And so that's another way real estate might be given to a charity through a retained life estate. And the charity owns it on the passing of the donor. For benefits, there are sort of two major benefits. One is the altruistic benefit of giving real estate, which is to fulfill a passion, fill a legacy that somebody has. And second, there's the tax consequences of making a charitable gift of real estate, which it comes in a couple of different ways. One is the obvious fair market donation to valuation, which is when you make the gift, as we say, in kind, or give the real estate, you are entitled, the donor's entitled to a charitable tax deduction of the fair market value. And at the same time, by making that donation to a charity, the donor is avoiding any potential capital gains tax liability, any profits they may have or gains they may have on the appreciation of the real estate are a non-event because the asset's being donated to a charity, and the donor is not liable for any profit or tax gains, profit gains through their ownership of the property. So that's the basics, very basic stuff around why people make gifts and the benefits to the donors. For the most part, there are other consequences, positive, but that's the highlight. General question that often comes up is there a limit on what kind of real estate can be given? So if you jump to the next slide there, Todd. So the question of, can I give commercial real estate? Can I give residential real estate? Does it have to be improved? Can it just be dirt? What if it's mortgaged? What if there's some other restriction on the property? The answer across all of these is generally yes. Any of these things, none of these prevent a gift from being made of that asset. They add to the complexity if there's a mortgage on it, if there's some deed restriction around the property, if there's a neighboring property that might impact the value. They all sort of come into the conversation, but there's no absolute no, you can't gift this, which a lot of people think they have to only can give a second home or give primary real estate. Well, commercial real estate is a very valuable and great asset to donate, especially given the appreciation that happens on some of those properties. So, and the underground rights, that's oil, gas, mineral. And as I said, as we say in this last bullet, many of the real estate properties are might be held by minority or partnership interests, which adds to some complexity of selling them, but they're absolutely in play. And this is what Todd does, is on the sales side of these minority interests and partnership interests and all these other closely held assets too. So any of these kinds of things are fair game for discussions on charitable donations.
So let me add a couple things. Thank you, Brad.
Yep.
On this last bullet point, well, I guess on any of the bullet points in our world, whether it's an appraisal that's required or a sale process, be it brokerage or auction, it's applicable to any of these bullet points, any of these asset types. But the partnership and minority interest in real estate, which is really becoming um, for what we're seeing and what we're doing in our organizations, kind of the 800-pound gorilla, as I'd like to say, because and because it is the easiest asset to gift because it has, in most cases, the lowest basis. And as Brad said, it is a partnership or minority interest. What is a partnership or minority interest? Well, to be specific, it could be a interest in a limited liability company. It could be a limited partner ownership in a partnership. It could be a minority general partnership. That's a possibility. It could be a tenants in common interest. Tenants in common, of course, is parties are actually on title. So in most partnerships, there is a entity, the 123 Main Street LLC or partnership that owns the property. And what is on title is the 123 Main Street LLC or partnership. And there's a managing member or a general partner, and then the limiteds are underneath them. So in any one of those types of structures, the overriding factor is you own a share of an entity or a share of the property directly. You don't own it outright. And as such, and we'll talk about this a little later on again, but for those of you who like stats, in the next 15 years will be the largest, the greatest time frame of gifting of real estate and partnership interests in real estate in the history of gifting because of the baby boomer generation, the investment cycle and timeline that families started getting into investment real estate, into those partnerships that own that real estate. And so we expect to see in the next 15 years this largest transfer, and this is not our stats, this is the ABA. There are numerous statistics out there from organizations. And as such, this type of gift, be it the minority interest, the partnership interest, is going to be very, very, very common. And again, the overriding reason is it's the easiest to gift because it's the lowest basis, and it for most investors, and they may have been paid out their investment back. They may have been paid it back multiple folds over the years. So it is a little different than, gifting a 50-unit apartment building or a $5 million tract of land or, a $1 million home. But that is what we are seeing. And that is, we expect to see a huge transfer of wealth. And one more stat, 75% of commercial real estate, which includes multifamily, valued over $5 million. 75% of those properties in the United States are held in partnership in some format. That should give you just a general size of the entire market. It's in the trillions of dollars. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Brad, key steps in donation process.
So the charity, any business owner that's going to take on ownership of real estate or business interests is going to want to do a fair amount of discovery on what they're buying, what they're taking on. And there's no difference here, whether we take it on, whether University of X takes it on. We all have fiduciary responsibility to know what we're buying or taking on and know what the risks are. So the discovery runs the gamut of basic description, value, location, the ownership structure. As Todd says, many of these real estate properties are wrapped somehow in an LLC or partnership. And you need to understand the nature of that, what the exit plans are for those business structures. Can people donate their shares of ownership? How does that all work? As I said before, really need to understand what encumbrances and restrictions are out there. The press has been raging on the subject of squatters, and that's not a small problem for some of these properties. So it isn't just let me donate this and the squatter problem will go away. That means the charity's taking on the squatter problem, which they won't want to do. There's the saleability. Is this something that's going to sell, or is this going to take a long time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort to sell it? The charity's going to want to know what that workload, work effort is. The environmental questions, what's the tax status, the liens, and again, the potential buyers. We find in many cases, there is an interested buyer that is coming along with the donation. So the donor says, I want to gift this. And by the way, my next door neighbor wants to think about maybe buying the property from you all when you have it. So the potential buyer question is who's out there. The qualified appraisal item here is very important because that is the item that values the donation for the donor. So the donor is obligated to get a qualified appraisal of the asset they're donating, whether it's an appraisal of the LLC business, which might be holding the real estate. If it's donation of the deed itself, somebody's got to do the appraisal of the property and the value of that deed. And there are some timing issues on how tight the timing of when the appraisal has to be done relative to the gift of the asset. It can't just sort of be 5 years ago, I got an appraisal and that's close enough. So there's some requirements there, but that's a responsibility of the donor. The charity is not going to take that on generally because that document is the donor's justification to the IRS for their tax return of the donation.
Brad,
further,
let me interject a couple things here.
Sure. Yep.
I want to go back on just in the last previous bullet point. The one thing that is going to dictate, the one document that's going to dictate structure of gifting is going to be the operating agreement of the entity. And that operating agreement is the first thing we ask for and look at to determine what restrictions there are, if any, if there is a right of first refusal, and so on. I would just historically, from our perspective, probably 60% of the operating agreements have some sort of right of first refusal. That does not, just to be clear, a right of first refusal does not limit the limited partner from selling their interest. It just gives the other limited partners, or in most cases, the general partner, the right to submit an offer and have that right of first refusal on other offers. So it does not limit us from selling the interest at all. But it is the operating agreement that is the first document that one would need to look at. Brad, regarding your point regarding qualified appraisals, obviously our firm, we are appraisers of real estate, business interest, discount valuation, so on and so forth.
Right.
So you are absolutely correct. It is the donor who is required to get the appraisal. But in many cases, if it is a smaller asset in dollars, we're finding that these aren't sophisticated people per se, so they don't necessarily have a estate and trust attorney to rely on or a lawyer to rely on. So we do find that the charitable organizations are the ones that are referring us to do that valuation, that appraisal of the property and or the partnership interest. So just for clarification's sake for our viewers, you have to value the underlying real estate, and then you have to value the interest in the entity. or even if it's a TIC interest, that discount, lack of marketability, lack of control requirement, valuation report must be provided. So in many cases, you're talking about two appraisals that need to be done. And then, yes, we would then sign Form 8283.
Right.
Brad, you want to talk about the potential property
Yeah.
improvement?
Yep. And on that appraisal thing, we refer appraisers to folks too. I mean, it depends on the asset, and they may need to know this a specific appraiser who's qualified to do that kind of asset. But yeah, that the referral is a very common thing in the industry. The potential property improvements, it may be that, if somebody would invest $10,000 in repairing a roof, that would return $20,000 at the sale price of the property. So that's an open question that needs to be discussed between the donor and the charity, and other interested and other parties who are savvy about real estate and what a prudent thing to do would be. It does not mean one has to spend money to improve the value. It's just a business decision for, if I can spend $20,000 to get $50,000, maybe that's a smart decision.
Well, Brad,
But
let me ask you a question
Yep.
Regarding that. I mean, from your perspective, how often do you see a potential donor make an additional investment in the property outright? I'm not speaking about the partnership side, but in the property directly. Is there a rule of thumb? You see it 50% of the time, 20% of the time?
No, it really depends on the timing is often what's driving when the gift is made, and they can't get the roof fixed, but they're going to, they may want to make the donation by 12/31, and they got to get it done, get the paperwork done, but they can't get the repairs done. Or very common, but not every day, there's a tenant in there and they make the donation. We've accepted it. We know the end of the lease. We're taking our chances. And the tenant finally leaves the building, and there's some improvements that need to be done to the property. So we know that going in, and we know we're going to want to repair the bedroom or do something or other. So it's just one more step of understanding how to maximize the value of the asset that's being donated.
So, okay. So I would say to you, in our world, it's probably only 15 to 20% of the time at best that there is going to be an additional investment in the improvement of the property prior to donation.
I'd
In
say
most
that's probably
cases,
same
yeah,
amount.
what we see is they're donating it, and for maybe reasons surrounding the property, they're donating in its as-is condition.
Right.
To your point, we just got done selling an apartment complex and the proceeds were donated to a foundation. But because this was an apartment complex and there are city and county requirements regarding, let's call it slumlord requirements, if you want to use it that way. So there had to be an investment by the family in that case to make the property habitable and up to code. But in the end, some of those responsibilities we moved to the buyer through the sale process.
Right.
The charitable foundation, they were just the recipient of the funds, not of the property.
Right.
So yes, I would say to you, in some cases, there may be improvements that would increase value, or it's a liability issue.
Right.
But yes, to that point.
Yep.
I guess next bullet point, Brad, processes to satisfy restrictions on debt. What do you have to say about that?
So on that one, people come, as I showed earlier, people arrive with a donation of some property that has a mortgage on it. And for us to take on the mortgage, that's a little complex. And for the most part, we would prefer to take it on debt free. So we have an open conversation with the donor about what it would take to buy out the mortgage. Would they buy it out and take the restriction and get the mortgage company off of the books? So we just did one in Charleston where, that's exactly what happened. There was a debt of X amount. The donor said, I want the full value of the donation. I want to pay off the debt. So we had to wait for the process of getting that mortgage paid off, and get the formal documentation discharge paper from the mortgage company that the debt had been paid. So understanding how to get rid of those. That doesn't mean that a charity won't accept real estate with a mortgage on it. It just means that the tax consequences of the fact the donor is going to get a benefit back from their gift, that changes some of the tax consequences, because they're going to get their mortgage paid off, which was a liability they had related to the property. And it, and it might not be mortgage. Maybe the donor says, I want to give this, but I'd like 20% back of the proceeds.
Right.
And again, that's called a bargain sale in the world of charity donations, and absolutely doable. We just need to discuss it and understand the tax consequences up front of all the parties that are involved in the conversation.
We've had a couple of instances, one just last year where we provided funding. Our company has a capital group, and for many of the people viewing know that we provide short-term and medium-term loans. But in a case where there was two family members and one family member did not wanted to be bought out directly, the other decided to gift. So we provided the funds to buy out that other family member,
right.
For that short term, and then from the sale we were repaid.
Right.
So
Yep.
it was just more of a kind of a bridge situation, but
Mhm.
that was something that
Yep.
had occurred not too long back.
Right. Right.
Moving on.
Yep. So these are the kinds of red flags that the charity, a new owner of any kind, is going to look for. The first one's very important, and it's actually a deal breaker, not the right of first refusal, but that existence of a contract or legally binding agreement to buy or sell the property. If a donor has a legally binding agreement for the property to be sold to somebody by the charity, that is in the eyes of the IRS not a charitable donation when they make that gift, because the deal has already been struck. Fundamentally, in the charity world, a donor makes a gift of money, securities, any asset, and they lose control of the asset. They can have recommending rights, but they cannot control what happens to the asset after they make the donation. The existence of a legally binding agreement with a future buyer establishes a point of control that the charity is no longer totally owning the transaction because somebody else has signed up for an agreement here. The IRS will void that donation if there is a legally binding contract or agreement by the donor to sell to a certain buyer. They need to lose control. They can certainly introduce the buyer to the charity, and the challenge of all of this is understanding the legal terms around that, the term, that legally binding terms. If it's not legally binding, but there's an agreement, that might be possible to make that donation, and the IRS will accept it, but accept the donation, the deduction. But that's the first red flag that goes up. If the deal is already baked to sell it to a new buyer, the charity really can't get in the middle of that. Right of first refusal, as Todd said, absolutely a reasonable thing. It's an introduction of a buyer. It's not locking into terms, and that's all it really represents. If there are tighter terms around that, like lock into the price will be X, and there are more specifics around the transaction, that might get sideways. But simply, I'll call you up when I'm ready to sell the property, does not void the tax deduction.
So I'm going to add one thing here that, because we're talking about factors, and these bullet points are all valuable regarding the property itself. to consider. But regarding right of first refusal, I think it's important for our viewers to understand that our experience is that most general partners do not act as fiduciaries, meaning they are not running the partnership in a way that is to the benefit of all the limiteds. They're running it to the benefit of themselves.
Hmm.
Historically, that's what we see day in and day out. But by law, they are a fiduciary, and as a fiduciary, they are supposed to do what is in the best interest of not just not for themselves, but for all the limited partners.
Right.
We find that when we get involved selling the partnership interest or even the fee simple interest, we have to do a little coercing, hand holding, with the general partner and to get them to be let's say on board with the process. In most cases, they learn and see what we're here to do is for the benefit of the process of sale and to get the best price for the asset.
Hmm.
But in some cases, some of the GPs will do what they can to try to hinder us, or hinder get obtaining the best price. Through to Brad's bullet points here, through not providing some of this information.
Right.
And candidly, in some cases we have to do digging, or in a situation we're dealing with right as we speak with a very, very large estate with multiple properties and interests that we're going to be selling and valuing. We have counsel representing the donor in this case, if you want to call it, and they are subpoenaed. They have now gone to court and they're subpoenaed, getting a subpoena for the parties, the general partnership, and requiring them to provide the documents that we've requested. So it can go to that degree.
Yep.
And for bigger estates, it's not necessarily uncommon. But I would say, for the smaller gifts, that doesn't happen.
Right.
Just, people getting involved, like Brad's firm and our firm, knowing what we do, knowing or what we're to do, that shows them that they can't pull wool over our eyes.
Right.
Right, Brad?
Yep. That's right. You brought
So,
on subject matter experts in this area, and that's where I think a lot of donors turn to us, us, and others to say, I haven't done this before, or this is going to get a little dicey. I need some help with my backbone in taking this forward.
yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, all these bullet points that are on this page when we talk about HOA rules, existing tenant leases, encumbrances, and so
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
I would say to you in general, at least from our perspective, we these factors or impediments may be reasons why somebody is going to donate.
Hmm.
Right? Most likely, or most commonly, I should say, is environmental issues.
Hmm.
So if it's a gas station, or it's a land parcel, or if it's an industrial building and it's dirty, as we call it,
Hmm.
and either the trustee, the trust, whomever knows it's dirty, has not obtained a phase 1 environmental report or phase 2 report,
Hmm.
or even a cost to remediate. They know it, and that's a reason they want to gift it,
Right.
or have us sell it through as a cross, as I like to say. That's a reason. Or I think, we just had this with a condo complex, to your point, Brad, number 2, the existing HOA rules,
Yeah.
or potential HOA requirements to fund remediation or repairs.
Right. Right.
Right, that could be 10, 20, 50, $60,000.
Right.
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 So that would be a reason to gift, not necessarily a factor not to gift.
Right.
I look at it the opposite way. Any
Yeah.
thoughts about any of this, Brett?
No, I just think, these all get to be levels of degrees of complexity. And at some point, you're in this business, I'm in this business, but owners aren't in the business of trying to manage every one of these little things, and they throw their
Yeah,
hands up and say, I can't do this. So these are not reasons not to, it's things to be aware of and
agreed.
flags to be watching for. So, but all good, all good.
Yeah. So just, I know kind of a little off topic. One of our viewers asked a question. Can you provide a range and some examples of reasonable minority ownership discounts? Um, I don't, Brad, I can,
I don't have that's I think that's more your world than mine in terms of
okay.
discounts that way.
So I would say to you generally, um, there's two points to this question. I'm not sure exactly which aspect of the if we're talking about from a gifting standpoint or from a donation standpoint, but I'll answer it in both ways. The IRS allows a discount for lack of marketability and lack of control. Those are two different discounts, and they will depend which or both can be taken based upon the structure of the entity. But I would say to you at the top end of the range that's most defensible and would limit IRS audit would be in the high 30% range. Discounts that are over 30% into the 40s are almost automatic audit risk. One thing our viewers should know that the IRS historically does look at previous discounts that the appraisal firm has done to determine if in this specific discount for this estate, for this interest, you're following the same principles that you normally do, or are you going outside of those percentages by a bigger delta? And they will look at that if they feel they need to, and then we would have to defend that for the audit. On the question that I think is also here regarding a sale of the property, the interest, the minority interest or the discounted interest, the partnership interest, what kind of discount would apply if one were to sell it, right? Sell it, whether it's owned, then gifted to the charitable organization or directly to or it's sold directly and it's a cross sale and the proceeds are gifted to an organization, right, Brad?
Right.
I cannot give our viewers a definitive percentage because it's the real question is how long is a piece of string? And I say it like that because every property is different and has its own economic benefits and merits, right? So I made this point the other day, and I'll use this example here. If somebody were to gift a partnership interest that owns a 50% vacant shopping center in downtown Cleveland that is in disrepair, that has vagrancy issues, that has city building code violations, it's barely covering its debt service. It needs improvements. I think you can see where I'm going. That discount for somebody to buy that interest, if it's even marketable, could be 60, 70, 80%. Right? Now, inversely, selling a fully occupied apartment complex in Long Island, in one of the beautiful communities in Long Island, right? That's fully occupied, that's been managed well, that is in a strong economic market in a community, has great growth potential. That discount, candidly, might be 15 or 20%. So I'm giving you big ranges because it's all based upon the type of property, the underlying property, and then to Brad's point, restrictions in the operating agreement. Brad, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And this all fits into the why the IRS says the appraisal has to be done by a qualified appraiser. There are law cases where CPAs have valued a person's business that's been donated, and the IRS has said, what is the basis of their knowledge to be able to come up with this number? And they've rejected the donation. And all of this that Todd's talking about is what's in his toolkit to understand how to do a qualified appraisal that would be hopefully replicated by 2 or 3 different people, depending on who came into the conversation. So that qualified appraisal, the word qualified, is very important to the IRS when it comes to the valuation of these things. Yep.
Great. And thank you for that question from our viewers. Brad, next, how do charities deal with inquiries of real estate
Right.
property?
So what we find is there are 3 ways this happens. One is donor calls up the university and says, I've got property, I want to make a donation. Will you accept it? And the charity university goes through all the same things we've been talking about and makes a decision about whether they'll take it on, whether their real estate department is qualified to handle property 2,000 miles away, how they'll manage the asset, what the risk is, what the cost is going to be, the partnership of brokers and contractors and property managers and everybody else that they need to herd in order to manage the asset. So the charity might well accept it because that's part of the business that they're in. Another way to do this might be to introduce the donor to another charity, and that's the world that I live in, is universities and donor-advised funds and folks who don't want to be in the real estate business actually introduce us, Decami Foundation, as an alternate charity to make the gift to, and they know our business model is we'll accept the asset, we'll cash it out, and then we'll send the proceeds back to the university, over to the university. So it could be the original charity accepts it if they want. It could be the original charity introduces an alternate way of handling it. Or third is the donor could just sell the property outright themselves and take the proceeds, manage all the stuff we're talking about here, and then pay the proceeds off to the charitable foundation charity that they want to support. And so those are generally the 3 ways about how you would get the proceeds of a real estate gift into the charitable world. I don't know, Todd, if you've seen another variant on that, but those are the 3 that come to mind for me that I see.
I think you're right on the money. One we just literally completed was number 3,
Yep.
which was the proceeds. We handled the sale of the valuation and the sale of the property, and then the foundation was the beneficiary of the sale in a 100%, and we directed escrow and legal to provide those funds directly to the foundation, none of which went to the seller, to the trustee, or so on.
Right.
And that made it very easy for the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we did all their work for them. They just received, a very big check.
Right.
So,
right.
as you say, Brad, there's lots of options.
Right. So again, this is repeating things that we've sort of already touched on, but the charity, when they make the decision to take this on, is taking on all of these bullets here. And as pedantic as it seems, if a charity decides to take a piece of real estate, they're going to be responsible for the HVAC system. They're going to be responsible for making sure that the lawn is mowed or the driveway is plowed. And when you get to that level, while it's not very sexy, when you get to that level of conversation, a lot of charities say, let me find somebody who can help me with this, because now they can hire a property manager, they can certainly take it and do those, but these are the things they're responsible for, and costs they're going to bear to some degree when they take on a piece of real estate business interest or whatever. So, and then there is one other one that we forgot to put on here, and that is, if this is in a partnership, an LLC partnership that is generating profits, there is the issue of the charity, when they take this on, is now going to be an owner and a sharer of the profits of the business. So they're going to get a K-1 tax return.
Right.
And this is, in the world of charities, this is definitely an unrelated business income event. and there is a tax on that. And so for the charity to take on corporate structures and take on the profitability of some of these business interests, their share of it anyway, they have a new tax liability that is not insignificant.
Right. And from our perspective, Brad, that's I think when we talk about especially operating company, even though you when you look at a partnership interest that owns real estate, yes, that is an operating company.
Mm-hmm.
We define it a little differently because we're in both camps of assets, and
Right.
that is if it was if it was a Burger King
Mm-hmm. Right.
or
Right.
an,
Yep.
a manufacturer of a widget
Right.
or whatever that is in business operating and manufacturing something, we see it almost, I don't actually, I think only, no, we've never seen that interest being gifted to a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
They always wanted us to sell it, monetize it in some way, and
Right.
retain the proceeds for your just to your point. I
Right.
mean, the last bullet point on this slide is from our perspective, I think the number one worry, concern, Brad,
Yep. Right.
that we see with the clients is the capital call,
Right.
right?
Right.
What is that risk for that property?
Right.
Um, Next,
So,
I think we
so let
talked.
me.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've been talking all around Charitable Solutions. Let me put that on the map a little bit for everybody. So, Charitable Solutions, as I said, is a for-profit organization. We've been in business 20 plus years, founded by a guy named Braun, who's been in the charity world and created this business back in '03. And um, this for-profit entity is the marketing arm, the operational arm, the administrative arm of the charities we own, which are the Decamai Foundation, the Decamai Asset Trust, and something called the National Gift Annuity Foundation. Those are all charities that we own. And each one of those charities contracts with Charitable Solutions as a for-profit entity to manage the business of those charities, manage the gifts, manage the sales, manage the insurance payments, and all of those kinds of things. So that's who we are. And that's why we're a viable alternative for a charity who gets this inquiry to say, that one's too risky. Let's pass that one on. The numbers you can see, last year we did over $1 billion of transactions, 160 plus transactions, and we've been going at a pretty good rate. You can see the mix of real estate versus business interests. It's a little flawed in the view there because a number of those business interests are real estate properties for all intents and purposes. But that was our business of 2023, and again, 100% of those assets were referred to us by other charities. I don't know if this slide's going to be too helpful. So it's a useful slide, but we're going to be short for time. So let's talk about the fees really quickly, because we're doing work here, and somebody's going to be reimbursed for the work they're doing. One of the important things is when a charity refers something to us, and I think this is the same when a charity pulls you in Todd, there's no contract per se with the charity just to have a conversation. There's no fee just to engage or, get Todd's home phone number so he can make the call into Todd or us. There's no contract, and we'll take any phone call. We'll talk to anybody about this stuff. And Todd, you want to talk about your fee structure there?
Yeah, since yours is laid out here, Brad,
Okay.
You're 100% correct. Our advisory and consulting business side of what we do is almost completely free and without charge to help people understand structure, issues, strategy. It is what we call a freebie. Regarding the valuation appraisal side of the business, that is a flat fee, or in some cases, maybe hourly, but generally mostly flat fee based upon the scope of work that we provide you with at the outset. Regarding the sale of the property, now we being both in our commercial group at Braun International, our residential group at Premier Estates, our structure for selling the property is generally discounted from what is marked to market in that given market from a commission standpoint. Our auction platforms are generally in a case where the buyer pays the fees, the seller pays no fees, zero fees from a commission transaction standpoint. So there are benefits there for some situations. We don't necessarily think, say, an auction is better than a brokered sale or vice versa. They're very different. But an auction does follow the requirements for many people that are under a time pressure, that want to gift it by a given time, or the foundation that's been given receive the property. They want it sold by a given time. An auction is date certain and is very valuable from that standpoint. It is also extremely valuable from a process that is agreed to and adhered to in court. Auctions are used in court, be it probate, be it receivership, be it bankruptcy. I could go on. And nobody can poke a hole at an auction from a court standpoint. So again, we don't advocate one process better or worse. It's a question for what is right for the situation. Our capital side, lending, those are structured deal by deal. And in some cases, we have been asked to just buy out the asset directly, which we can and will do. Our fund is, our capital side of our business is about 300 million. So we have the capital to do just about any kind of assets that would ever come to us in this world. So that is another option. We don't advocate it. We just say, here's another option for you if you want it. Very simple.
Yep.
Yeah.
So do you want to hit our fees really quickly?
Sorry. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
So on the Decamai side, our structure is based on the value of the asset, and it's a lot of words and characters there. The quick way to look at it is roughly we charge 2 to 2.5% on the appraised value of the asset. That's our fee. Nobody pays that up front. Our fee is taken when the asset sells, so there's no out-of-pocket cash from anybody. We get, $750,000. We take our fee, and then we send the proceeds off to the charity of the donor's choosing. If we're going to hold the asset for an extended period of time, we do have a 1% per year value that we charge that's prorated, and generally. And then the other piece of the process to be aware of, and I was not clear about this. We're not real estate brokers ourselves. We're going to call up Todd and say, Todd, we got a property in X, and can you handle this for us? And we're going to go with the broker who can handle the deal as effectively, efficiently, and for the best deal for everybody. So there is still the broker fees, the appraisal fees are still on top of this, but this is the fee that Decamai takes to do our work, to take over the risk and liability of owning these properties. And we might own it for 3 to 5 years. I'll give you a quick business case. And that is, we took a commercial office building last year worth about $40 million. And when the donors donated it to us, they said, we want the proceeds of sale to go to these 3 organizations. However, it kicks off $3 million of positive cash flow a year, and we don't want to lose that $3 million of positive cash flow. So while you're owning it, would you keep collecting that $3 million and send that off to charity as well? So there's a property we're likely to own 8 to 10 years. We'll take a look at the world and what the crystal ball does to everybody in 10 years and decide what to do with it. Do we sell it? Do we keep it going? So any number of possibilities, depending on what the donor wants, what we're willing to take on as a risk and liability. Obviously, if this thing's kicking off $3 million of positive cash flow, there aren't a lot of negatives. It's a fairly new building too. So, but anyway, that's the nature of what we do. That's the fees we get. And people say, well, are there any other fees? Are there any other fees? And the answer is, it's not quite a simple no. And that's not quite a simple yes. It depends. If there's a rent transaction that we now are taking because we own the property, now there's income coming in on the property. If we're going to want to pay insurance and utilities, make sure that the thing's ready. So there's income, there's expenses. Might hire a property manager to manage all those things. So that all plays into the equation of what does it take to manage the property while we own it. So just to add our piece of that.
I think, yeah, and I think, look, from our perspective, whether we're in advance of Brad and his company or after Brad and his company,
Right.
I mean, we all kind of flow into this in different ways. But there are legal expenses that generally we see when we're involved selling the partnership interests, the minority interests. We generally we ask that the seller, whoever it is, to provide their certain documentation for the transfer and assignment of the interest. So we our first, one of our questions is, who's your estate trust attorney? Do they have a transactional side to their company, to their firm, and help them kind of work through that process. Like Brad's firm, we are extremely well connected and probably work with the top 300 law firms in the US
Right.
that work in estate trust, probate, litigation, and so on. So, we try to make this sale process or even the valuation process smooth as possible. But I think, to Brad's point, he would say the same thing I'm saying right now, or agree with me, is that there's a lot of education here. And there's a lot of talking through this process overall and what the benefits are, the pros and cons, et cetera, of doing whatever it is they are looking to do. So you definitely want the professionals involved that know what they're doing at all levels. Whether we're talking about gifting a $50,000 partnership interest that we have to sell at the low end, or, to Brad's point, a $40 million office building.
Right.
There is risk and liability across the board, and you want the professionals there to help you look at your options. Would you agree, Brad?
Absolutely. And every state's got some different rules to it too. So you got to be careful of what's going on in Pennsylvania versus California versus Oregon. So having the experts with you is important. Yep.
Yeah. Case studies, we don't have a lot of time for case study.
Right.
You just gave us a good example. I think a common question for us that I didn't think about mentioning until you just brought it up, Brad, so thank you, which is the size of deals, right? You just gave let's call it the upper end of the spectrum range.
Right. Right.
In our world, we're dealing with properties that could be as little as $200,000 or $300,000.
Right.
Interests that could be valued at $50,000 or around that or less.
Right.
Sure, there's always the very big kahuna estates.
Sure.
But in most cases, it's smaller dollars. And it does take, I think, Brad, you would agree, it takes as much work and effort and time to deal with a small gift as it does a big gift.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. And I'd add that one of the interesting dynamics is that there are other players we have competitors. Like most good industries, we have competitors that keep us honest and provide other services and alternate approaches. And for a charity to receive $100,000, even if it were the value of the asset were $200,000 and all the costs and everything to get to a cash point was $75,000, I will tell you, any charity in the country would love a cash check for $125,000.
Yes.
So small numbers, they're relative to your point, Todd.
I agree with you. We're talking to an organization right now that we might be able to get them receive a gift of about $5 million at sale value of a number of partnership interests. And they almost fell off their chair when we started talking to them. It was such a large interest, and they had never received, and this is a very big organization.
Right.
They had never received this size before. and candidly are completely inexperienced
Right.
in this process with this kind of asset. So, but you're right. I think in most cases it's definitely smaller gifts. But again, it takes work, and you need to have the experts.
Right.
So I know we're at the top of the hour.
Right.
Anybody have any questions? If they want to unmute themselves, they're more than welcome to do it. I want to thank Brad for
Yep.
taking the time. We brought Brad in and his company, are both organizations, because as we see it, they are at the top of their field and have a depth of expertise and knowledge that really is second to none. Um, and and we're pleased to have him speak and take the time out. And as I said to all of our viewers, this presentation will be available at the fiduciaryforum.com website, as will be the presentation. So if we have no questions from anybody, I don't want to take any more of Brad's time, but Brad, I can't thank you enough for being the expert that you are and being
Well,
on with us. And
yep.
hope all our viewers felt the same, and want to
Yeah.
thank you all. And we will have another fiduciary forum presentation towards the end of May. Topics coming forward with a major trust company involved. So we look forward to seeing you all again. And Brad, thank
Yep.
you.
My pleasure.
Thank
And
you very much.
thank you for the
Thanks, Brad.
invitation. My
Th
pleasure.
th Thank you all. We
All right.
appreciate it. Have a good week and a good month. Thank you so
Good.
much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.